Well, hello everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Espresso with Matt. I'm here with my friend Ryan Fish, who is a very talented HR leader, recruiter, and we're going to have a range of discussion today about talent selection, HR, and some ideas about the job search out there for you today. Ryan, welcome. How are you doing today?
Doing well, thank you. I appreciate you having me today.
Very excited about having you on today. And before we get started, we have a lot to talk about today. Why everyone wants to know what are you drinking today? What's the coffee or what's the beverage of choice?
I actually am not typically a hot beverage person, so I have cherry Coke.
Cherry Coke. There you go. So I will tell you, I got to change my name for this show. I've had about 20 guests now, and maybe less than a quarter are actually drinking coffee. So myself, I have my standard double espresso, which gets me going pretty much every day. Thank you so much for joining. And you are out in Minnesota, correct? So
I
someone
am.
from our yeah, so get some Midwest flavor out there today. So Ryan, thank you so much for joining. Really excited about it. Just everyone out there, maybe just take a minute or two, kind of give a little bit of your background, some of your work experience, some of your talents, if you could share that with everyone.
Absolutely. First of all, I've been doing this for a couple of decades at least. So I started way back when in financial services, but I've worked in a lot of different industries and verticals. Worked for some big names like Microsoft and 3M and Cargill and Honeywell and Mac Tools, and the list goes on, as well as some mid-range and smaller players out there over the years in a large variety of HR type roles, most of which have been in talent acquisition. So the recruitment side of things, I've recruited everything from uh, aerospace engineers. I've recruited rocket scientists, actually, electrical, mechanical, chemical, software engineers. I've done a ton of IT recruiting. Worked for companies like Cargill and the food and beverage, the mining side of things, the
Awesome.
chocolates, dairy, beef, all of that type of thing. I've worked in a number of different manufacturing environments, working with companies like 3M, working with a company called Parker Hannifin, and a variety of others as well. But I've also dabbled in three or four different medical device companies, working in clean room settings and things that way to help recruit people as well. Uh,
So,
yeah,
Ryan, just real quick, I got to go back and give credit to whatever association represented the rocket scientists because I don't know when how that became the standard bearer of excellence. So, it's funny. One of our local politicians here, Congressman, is actually a rocket scientist, and actually that was his whole campaign. My representative is a rocket scientist, so but what diversity of talent acquisition opportunities out there and positions out there. I mean, that just shows the breadth of your knowledge of working in the field. And we want to get into that today a little bit about where talent selection is today, how's it evolved over the years, and how, most importantly, what's the important information people need to know. Really want to let you brag for a minute. Congratulations, Ryan. You just passed the SHRM
thank you.
certification.
Yep.
We were just talking about that over the last few weeks, and you know, it's something on my to-do list, on my kind of goal board, my agenda. So I'm certainly going to take this opportunity to listen a little bit. How did that go? And what made you decide to get that certification? How was the test? And how was the prep for it?
Absolutely. Well, I know there's two main tests that are out there. The one that's been out there the longest, the SPHR, which is what I passed, is done by HRCI, but the major association, of course, we all follow and default for a lot of advice, and where we meet with our peers is done through SHRM.
Yeah.
So, I made use of a dislocated worker program, actually, being that I have been on the search myself for an opportunity. And making use of that program, I got the state to actually pay for me to sit for the test as well as do an online training. And I took a couple of months in prep, working pretty much full time doing that and searching for work. And, I've got to say, one thing that not everybody knows about those tests is that walking in, it's not a matter of just knowing the knowledge, it's being able to actually apply the knowledge because there are varying degrees of what is right and what is wrong,
Yeah.
meaning that it's not always one answer. Sometimes it could be two or three answers. And if you get any one of those two or three wrong, you get the whole answer wrong.
Yeah.
Um, and then, there's a variety of situations where you look and go, none of these answers are correct. Which one is the kind of the best of the worst, so to
Yeah.
speak? But all in all, they do that to make sure that if they're signing off and saying someone has passed these exams,
Yeah.
they really are a professional in that field.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I appreciate that from that standpoint, knowing that, it's not something that just the average Joe could go in and take the test and just get it right, so to speak. So,
Well,
um,
Ryan, I mean, thank you for all that advice. First of all, I want to look into that dislocate that program for the workers. I didn't
yeah,
I didn't know that was something you could use for this test. That's something I will definitely research a little bit on my own and look to see if I can take advantage of that myself. And
yeah,
I think it's a great summary about how unique it is to work in HR. Everyone thinks HR is easy till you actually have to do HR and work with the humans. And
right,
isn't that really true about working in HR? There's so many degrees of really wrong and right, but there's levels to that. And very, very rarely, at least in my experience working in HR as a leader, did was the answer crystal clear. You
right,
have to do it this way or you have to do it that way. 99% of the time, there's degrees. And I got to tell you, a lot of my work as an HR leader, I spent talking to leaders and saying, look, you can proceed that way. You're not breaking any laws if you do it that way. Here's a better option. Here's another option. And here's maybe the best option I would do. And sometimes, your leaders will look at you and say, well, can you just give me the solution? And you have to be a little bit like a guru and say, well, we're going to work on the solution together. But I love that discussion about the test because it really is, I think, testing your ability to take that knowledge and the policies and procedures and apply it to real world situations. So I'm looking forward to taking the test. You have years of experience in HR, and one of the things that you and I have been talking a lot about, we're networking with various different HR groups, talking to a lot of HR professionals. Overall, the field of HR, I would say it's fair to say, is in really a state of transition. And it's probably, I'm not spilling any secrets here, probably a very difficult market out there for the HR as we're evolving. And so, you've been in talent selection for many years, HR for many years. What have you seen in the market? Where do you think the market's evolving, the talent selection? And what are some of the things that are, people need to be aware of if they're in the market right now for an HR role?
yeah. There's actually a few different pieces to that. I would say first and foremost, there are a lot more of us looking than ever before. Uh, if you look just, in the last 6 months, let alone, in the last few years, there's been tens of thousands of layoffs just within HR. When you're working, against, maybe 100 people or 200 people nationally is very different market than if it's, trying to compete and, you know, trying to look for work when there's tens of thousands of people looking for maybe 1,000 jobs, if that. So that's been very, very difficult for a lot of us since I'd say probably late 2022 for a lot of people. I think it really hit home kind of mid 2023 for a large majority. That's when a lot of the major layoffs started. With that in mind, the whole idea of networking, the whole idea of being able to get out there and do public speaking, like what we're doing, becomes that much more important and much more critical to moving forward.
Yeah.
It also has shifted and changed due to a lot of different things with AI. AI has taken leaps forward. It's kind of funny because the way people talk about it and the way it's come up, people, almost sound like, oh, AI is brand new. No, AI has been out there for many years. It's just that some of the leaps forward that it's been taking and how it's being used has changed dramatically since about 2022, 2023 range. And, in that way, it's not necessarily getting rid of a ton of jobs, but it is changing what everybody is doing.
Yeah. Eh, lot to unpack there. Let's kind of dig into that a little bit. So, I mean, you can read the unemployment numbers, you can read that, every month they're creating a certain amount of jobs. That does not mean that these jobs are equally applied throughout the whole economy. So as you kind
No.
of, one of the things I used to do as an HR leader, I would always get into those numbers a little bit.
Yep.
I worked mostly in the healthcare organization, and we were always looking for talent, nurses, entry level technicians. But then we ended up really after the pandemic, our ability to treat patients were being impacted more by, do we have enough dietary aides? Do we have enough housekeepers? Do we have enough technicians? You know,
Yes.
the positions that were entry level type positions, we were in fierce competition to those positions. And it's really hard to be a leader in a healthcare organization, say, we have to cap our census here because we don't have enough dietary workers, housekeepers, aides. And this is all kind of results of the pandemic. So I think that's the first thing, is that these jobs are coming back, and you see 70,000, 100,000, 200,000 jobs being entered.
Yes.
A
Yep.
lot of them are in the service industry, a lot of them are
Yes.
entry level positions. So that's the first thing I think people have to understand out there, that the unemployment rate is an indicator, but having historically low unemployment does not necessarily mean that it's a great market for all different positions out there. And so I think that's really kind of maybe some of the news out there, and then whether it's bad or not, just the reality where we're at. You talked a lot about AI, and I want to
Mhm.
talk about that a little bit too. Um, you know, I've taken this time over the last few months to really educate myself in AI, understand it, use it. I've taken a lot of LinkedIn learning, a lot of classes like that. But how has AI specifically maybe impacted the talent selection and HR specific areas, in your opinion?
I've actually gone to a few trainings myself lately where uh, they've had some, peers of ours out there talking about how they basically have created an AI that did what coordinators traditionally had done,
Yeah,
but they did it much more quickly, much more effectively, just because they were learning on how to get it to report and show, what they needed to get done today, this week, this month. They could make it specific to a leader. They could make it so it could actually, at any given time, produce a complete report, including, pie graphs and bar graphs and things like that, that you could present to a hiring leader to be able to say, this is exactly where we're at. This is how many people we've reached out to. This is how many people we have in all the different stages of that funnel. And they even showed how they're using AI to automatically reach out and do some of the screening as well. And I was actually amazed at how far it's actually come with the AI sounding like an actual person. It really wasn't that long ago here where a lot of the AI sounded kind of robotic and it didn't have the availability of responses that would make it seem authentic or, like you're actually talking to another person. But it's gotten so much better.
yeah,
The language it's using, the sound it does. They actually gave an example. They, typed in, I mean, they took maybe 15, 20 seconds to type in into one of these tools, AI tools, how they wanted to do kind of a sell for the company they were working for. And it created a complete podcast itself with a male voice and a female voice, and they were joking back and forth, and they created the dialogue. The AI created that dialogue without any prompting other than this is the goal,
Yeah.
and I want it to be this long.
Well, I think we should go out for the audience right now. Brian and me actually do exist. We're here.
Yes, we're here. Yes, yes, we're real.
We're actually real people. But and you look at that, and people can get terrified with that or overwhelmed with that. And the more and more I've been thinking about that, about what AI is doing, I think the different skill sets people have to have. And one of the things I talk about a lot about my communications about authentic, real conversations, like actually enjoying the human part of human resources. And
Yes.
one of my kind of maybe, quips about HR sometimes is when I do get around a whole bunch of HR professionals and they're kind of venting, sometimes I ask myself, how many of these people in the room actually like humans? Because that's part of the job, right? And so I think, if HR has become in the past very transactional, maybe very clerical or doing the data. Well, I'm hoping this AI revolution really helps HR become is more focused on the human experience and more focused on really taking that data, interpreting that exactly what you talked about with your assurance certification. Yeah,
Yeah.
great. I'm not going to spend a ton of time doing the data analysis. I'm going to have AI do that. I have this information, but here's where my experience and my knowledge helps interpret that, helps put some value to that, can tell a story.
Right.
It's like, I think those are some of the skill sets people have to really start growing and learning. There's going to be people who need to analyze the data. You're just not going to be working on the spreadsheets for 2 weeks to get the data. You might
Exactly.
that, which for me, awesome. I love data. I always like scoreboards. But what I really liked about that was getting in front of people and say, here's what the data is. Here's what it's driving us to do. I wasn't a huge spreadsheet guy, but I liked the results of having that information in front of me. Um, so for me, if I have a way to get that done by a computer and I can still have that power of presentation, so it's such a great point, Ryan, because I think all these aspects of it, fear, I think our worry, especially in talent selection, I think it's gone a little too far the pendulum where there's been a discount of the talent that's needed in talent selection, if you will. That because AI has taken a lot of these administrative and some of these screening things out there, I think a lot of organizations have kind of either cut back way too much on their talent selection process, or this idea of really recruiting and finding a pipeline has gone away, I believe, over the years too. It's just fill this job and move on to the next job. And there's not that strategic approach as much talent selection. You've been in the field for many years. What are you seeing with that? Is that something you're seeing these days? And maybe talk a little about that.
Sure. I would agree completely with that. And I think there's a lot of different things that are happening. There are certain companies out there that are going through that learning curve. They're making the assumption they're looking purely at the dollars. What am I investing? What am I getting out? What's my return on investment? And in their mind, some of these people who have never, really truly been an HR professional don't understand the value. How we reduce risk. Again, that human element. How are we connecting and building that brand, from that human perspective? But they're also looking at changing behaviors out there. Some of the different generations now don't want to interact as much. And I hate to say that, but it to them, how they get things done is different than our generation, different than the generation before, and maybe even some of the generations in between. And some of that is just going to be, a learning curve for us as well as we go through this. But some of these companies are making those mistakes and going, oh, yeah, this is why we have HR. This is why we have more of these, even from the selection standpoint, some of those recruiters in between. This is what they are adding. And sorry, my
No, it's
my
fine.
cat
It's a blurry cat.
It's my tuna cat. Her name is Luna. I call her Tuna because I think it's
Oh,
funny.
very cool.
Tuna fish. And to make it even funnier, her middle name is Star. Um,
Luna,
so
Luna starfish.
yeah, yep, exactly. So anyway, in this whole process,
Yeah,
again, I know that we're going through a learning curve with that. Because the technology is changing faster than what we can implement.
yeah,
A lot of leaders are trying to look for the most cost-effective way in a down market in general. We're still facing a lot of those global implications, everything from, tariffs and trade and, things that way.
yeah.
Even in the services industry, there's just so many companies out there looking for that. And one thing that this whole economy has also spurred is a lot more people starting their own businesses too.
Yes. Yep.
So there's that much more of business owners, small businesses that really need to get a piece of that pie.
Yep.
So there's a lot to level out here. And it will. It'll happen. Um,
Right. Yeah, and Ryan, I think if you look at, I'm a big fan of history. I love history books.
yeah.
I've been
Yep.
really reading a lot about revolution,
Yep.
change throughout
Yep.
time. There
Yep.
was probably some pub in England right now, 200 years ago, talking about the steam engine and how it's taken all the jobs away before the Industrial Revolution. And, people who were, horse bug riders before the cars. I mean, every technology that's impacted society has made this kind of ebb and flow of things. So I think I look at that and think we're going to be okay. Um,
Yes.
we're going to have to adapt. We're going to adapt to this new technology. And I share this story. I think I share this all the time, and people laugh at me when I share the story, but it's true. I started college in 1994. My freshman year dorm, maybe one or two people had like a desktop or laptop on my floor. And I
Yep.
remember distinctly two professors my freshman year at Colgate so talk about in their syllabus that they believe spell check, using spell check was a violation of the honor code at Colgate. Now we laugh today, right?
Yep. Oh,
Because
I
quite
totally
frankly,
remember that. Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
I remember that.
I couldn't spell, if you ask me right now, say if my family could spell restaurant, it's not great. I'm not the best speller. So I think about that a little bit, how that changed. And can
Yep.
you imagine today telling someone at work, hey, you're not allowed to do spell check? You wouldn't be able to do that. But I think, you mentioned something. We talked a little about that. Starting your own business or starting your own brand.
Yeah.
You know, the opportunity here is with a desk, a computer, few programs,
Yep.
minimum investment. You have more access to technology and resources than you probably had in human history. If you learn to leverage, an AI program or two, you can create content that's authentic, that's in your voice, that helps you scan. And to me, like having the AI is like having a great assistant. I still review it, I still try to be authentic with it, but it gets you some wonderful tools at very low cost too. So, and I think the
Yes.
opportunity for a lot of HR leaders here is in this emerging gig private work is there's still laws out there to follow. There's still policies. There's still best practice. And to
Yes.
leverage that in a way is really important. So, you really do talk about a lot of different opportunities there. And I think it's just a fascinating conversation. In the end, though, I think the fact of the matter is for all those out there in the job market, maybe think about enter the job market, or going to be forced into the job market for all the changes that's going on, you can't stand still.
No.
What you did to get your job a few years ago won't get you a job today. So
Mhm.
Ryan, you have tons of experience. You're so well networked. What are some advice you're going to give someone right now to get into the job market? What should they be approaching? How they should be managing it? What's been your approach and how other people around you are approaching the job market these days?
I use an example actually. There was somebody in one of my many networking groups that I work through, and I know that you and I have connected through Frank Wittenauer's HR job search. That's how you and I originally connected. But there was one person in another group I connected through who was on a search, and she networked with me only because she liked my personality, which that's fine, whatever the reason. But she didn't realize that I actually had connections in her field because she was in such a hyper niche field of work that she just completely had no idea that I even knew anything about it. And I guess when I think about that, she was in bovine reproduction. Um,
Okay.
so we're talking about cows basically having other baby cows and a lot of the milking, lactation type pieces of things. And I had actually recruited people just like her for Cargill, but she had no idea about that. In fact, she had never heard of Cargill. So, right, wrong, or indifferent, she almost blew off our networking meeting. And if she would have missed the opportunity for me to connect her with somebody and help her get a job. And you
Well,
just
I'm
don't
sure.
know. You don't know who that person is going to be. And the important part is to take chances on people you wouldn't necessarily see that connection because you never know who is going to help you or who might know somebody, even if they haven't worked in that industry.
If you're playing Espresso with Matt Bingo at home and you had Bovine Reproduction on your card, there you go. You get to check off that box today. We talk about a lot of things on this show over coffee. It's pretty amazing. You know, but it's such a great point, Ryan, because I've done so much networking over the last few months, and I approach everything as of what can I bring to this conversation? How can I help this person?
Right.
And what can I learn? And I used to have that approach when I did interviews. I genuinely really liked interviews. And I had lots of great interviews when people maybe weren't the great fit for the role, but I had a wonderful conversation. I learned something new about a person. And maybe down the road that position opened up that made a fit for them. And so you gotta connect with people, ask the questions, you know,
Yes.
ask what they're doing. Don't be shy in saying, how can I help you? And is there anything that you could do to maybe help me? Be free to ask those questions because that's where the wonderful connections come through. And I'm learning so much. And really, whether it's LinkedIn, these network groups, or anything like that, the one thing I will say, my faith in humanity has been reinforced with the amazing people I've been meeting on these network groups who are just getting on calls and helping each other for no other reason, just to help another person out. And um, so if you're approaching the job market right now, my best advice is don't do it alone. Do not. Because if
Yep.
you're going to sit at the screen, apply to 50 jobs a day, and just keep grinding that way, it's going to get depressing very quickly. If you look at an opportunity to upskill, like you take it to opportunities to get a new certification, an amazing certification. You've taken an opportunity like maybe I have. I'm gonna start a podcast. Why not? I never did this before. I'm gonna learn some new skills. Take an opportunity to learn and meet new people, network. Take your see where your career goes from there. It's really wonderful advice, Ryan. Again, thank you for sharing that story because you don't know what you're going to miss if you don't ask those questions. And that's a great example of that. Ryan, you have some great tips about talent selection, HR, how to approach the market right now. If you had to kind of boil it down right now to give advice out there for the hiring managers who are now looking for talent,
Yep.
what advice would you give as to a hiring manager to look for out there? Um, what should they look more for? What would you do if you could talk to all the people who have open jobs right now and say, please do these things? What would you say?
Talking to most companies, it doesn't come down to the skill set in many jobs. It comes down to those soft skills and the right person. Yeah, and by that, I'm not saying any race, creed, color, sex, nothing like that, but more a matter of the right attitude, more a matter of the willingness and want to grow. Exactly what you were just talking about is what most recruiters, most hiring managers are looking for. So, in looking at this, that's probably the most important thing is keep in mind and be purposeful to find the right person and then make sure that they have the right skill set. So don't just ask the questions that, tell you, if they have this exact skill set, but be thoughtful, be planful about non-discriminatory ways to learn more about that person, what they value, what they want, how you can help them grow. So be purposeful and be empathetic would be the second part. You look at,
Exactly.
again, come to that table with what can I do to help that person? Whether it's in this job or, again, like you said before, maybe something in the future.
Yeah. That word empathy is, I've asked that question to many different guests over the last few months. And that word empathy in the hiring process, I hear more and more. And it really does, it's a brand. It stands out when you're an empathetic hiring, and it stands out when you're not. And candidates talk one way or the other. And if you produce empathy and understanding, even if you don't get the job, you could have a very positive impression of an organization. Ryan, great advice. I mean, some really wonderful nuggets out here. As we're moving in now, people want to connect with you, how they find you, where to find Ryan at this point.
Well, I'm easy to find on LinkedIn, Ryan Fish, SPHR MBA.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they can always email me at principal, and that's with the PAL, not the PLE, principal MN recruiter at gmail.com. Or, again, I do speak at a number of different uh, uh, networking groups. One of the ones coming up here on the 21st of March is going to be at the Accountable and Hopeful Fridays networking meeting based out of Charlotte, North Carolina. And it's an online thing, so anybody can look it up on LinkedIn and join. So, yeah.
Well, if you're not connected to Ryan right now, he really is a must follow in this space. Really one of the nicest men you'll meet. Great sense of humor, and who knows? You should play the game of what has Ryan recruited for, and you probably have a job that he's recruited for that you've never heard of before, and that's a fun game to play with Ryan also. So a lot of knowledge, Ryan. Thank you so much. Get to the espresso round now. Talking about some quick questions here, some quick
Yeah.
hitters. Um, what is the best piece of advice you got over a cup of coffee, or in your case, a cold cherry Coke?
Yeah, one of the best pieces of advice, and I wrote little notes off to the side, apologize here. Basically was to have confidence. I think that's the one thing that you look at anybody who's early in their career versus later in their career. It's not always necessarily a lot of the knowledge. It's more, hey, I've been doing this long enough. I'm much more confident in what I do. So having that earlier in my career, I think may have projected me a little further. And of course, networking. If I would have started networking a lot earlier, I think that would have made a big difference.
Absolute wonderful advice, that confidence, that ability, those putting those 10,000 hours in. But that networking skill is something you don't really have to have in your whole career. And I've mentioned many times on my content, biggest mistake on my career, I got too busy for networking, stopped networking, and that became a bad thing because I wasn't getting those fresh ideas and those fresh contacts. And it really is, network is really the lifeblood, especially in human resources. You can go back and talk to a younger Ryan and give Ryan some advice. What advice are you giving yourself?
Besides the networking piece of things, I think I would just, remind myself to be patient. Everything in life changes. So don't try to predict what it is. Roll with it, go with it, and look for those opportunities.
Absolutely.
When you
And
miss the mark, when you miss doing something completely, the way that you would have hoped it would have gone, it's just an opportunity to do what you do better next time.
absolutely, there's going to be, life happens when you make other plans.
Yep.
And, that's how you have to approach life, to change, roll the punches, and be able to have that confidence and that ability and that network to manage through those changes. I think let's get to our last question because we gave so much advice out there to leaders about how to hire and what go from there. Last question. have a beverage with anyone, any place, any time, who are you choosing?
You know, I actually have two people in that
Sure.
whole mix, and they were two exchange students I had back in 2019. So going into the whole COVID thing, I had this boy from Italy named Martino, who was from Modena, Italy, and I had another boy that stayed with me at the same time, Michael, who was from Mainz, Germany. And I would love to go and visit them, in their own countries, in their own cities, meet their families in person. And it'd just be great to catch up with them. It's just been a long time. So
What an amazing experience, and you can learn so much. And travel to me is one of the most important things to do for education. You give me someone who traveled, for someone who's educated, I'll take the travel any day of the week because there's a breadth of knowledge there. Ryan, this was wonderful. There was a lot of great conversation, a lot of great advice out there for people. Um, there is everything's changing out in the job market, but it's not a time to despair. It's really a time to reinvest in ourselves, to continue with the energy, continue with the networking. And Ryan, you have such a great approach to that. So I really thank you for sharing that and for all that you've helped me with over the last few months in broadening my skill set. So thank you so much, Ryan, for joining Espresso and Matt today. Really appreciate it.
thank you. I appreciate it too.
All right, guys. Well, until we have our next cup, see you everyone soon.